Cities are the heart of every civilization. Cities are centers of commerce, trade and industry. They are melting pots for culture, religion and innovation. The fates of entire countries, continents and the strings of history are decided by the wills and the needs of cities. But their power has a high price. Thousands or even millions of mouths need to be fed on a daily basis. Clean, drinkable water needs to be accessible. Wastewater needs to be brought out of the city to not pollute the narrow streets and alleys. The infrastructure and needs of a city is enormous. Hello, I'm the Worldbuilding Sage, and in this video I'll talk about cities. In fiction, cities aren't necessarily a rarity. Cities bring so much potential for conflict and tension that stories set in cities basically write themselves. However, cities are complex topics and have so many facets to them that they deserve a whole string of videos on their own. For this video, I have 3 questions you need to ask yourself when creating the basics and the foundations of a city. Question 1. Where do you place your city? A city's placement is the most fundamental of questions, as it's pretty much the foundation of the city's quality of life and even survival, and the fundament of the other 2 questions. I think it's generally safe to assume that most cities are built near larger water sources like rivers or lakes. Clean, uncontaminated water supplies are essential for any human being on Earth, and I haven't seen or read any fantasy where this doesn't apply for any other humanoid being either. Besides drinking water, you need water for sanitation, sewage, livestock and crops. And most importantly, for the economy. Carrying goods over waterways, no matter if over river, lakes or the seas, has been the quickest form of transportation for most of human civilization. Good connections in turn drive people into your city in the first place, which again brings more trade and more people. A nigh endless cycle. But not every city has grown out of its water access and ways. Not even all the big cities in the world have direct access to major rivers. Take Beijing for example. Beijing's placement as the literal capital of the north was out of military and defense reasons, first and foremost. Originally, the city was called Qi and had no major waterways passing through it. But Qi was located in a plain close to ancient China's borders and acted as a defense against the many nomadic peoples to the north, giving Qi a more and more major importance. So much so that it eventually grew into the capital we know today. Beijing's water supplies are brought in with large canal systems from far away and groundwater, making it the largest example that a river or a coast or a lake isn't necessary to build a large city. But if there aren't major reasons not to, cities usually grow near bodies of water. Essentially, think of 3 major factors: the water supplies, military defense, and to a lesser extent, since it will come anyways eventually, access to trade. If you can explain these 3 factors, you can create any city wherever you like, even in the most fantastical of locations, like outside of the American concrete desert. Question number 2. Food supplies. If you missed food in the previous question, here it is. Many cities in the history of humanity have shown that access to food isn't necessarily a limitation on where cities grow and are built, but more of a challenge to make the city actually work. As cities have a huge population, there are huge numbers of mouths to feed. In the past, cities were known to be flocked with livestock. Gardens to grow vegetables were more common than you might think too. In many historic towns and cities, they walled even some of their fields in to keep their population at least somewhat fed during a siege. But most food supplies will come from outside the city. While today's cities are stocked with foods from all around the world, cities in the past usually had a more limited range of supply. Cities had a massive array of farmsteads at their disposal. Farmers carried their produce into the city to sell sell it on the market, and see, there's trade again. But importing from the direct vicinity isn't the only way to feed your medieval or ancient cities. It all depends on the empires or cities' logistical and administrative capabilities. If they can, they of course will import their crops from far and wide. The best examples are ancient Rome or the ancient city of Athens, which both had population numbers their medieval counterparts, and basically all medieval cities for that matter, could only dream of. Athens imported their grains from their colonies in the Black Sea region for the most part, while the city of Rome was mostly fed through Sicily and Egypt. Grain supplies to these cities dictated politics, and in Rome's case, even the politics of the entire empire. Your rulers don't want to keep a city's population hungry. Farmers can't cope with hunger. They are compliant, but city dwellers, oh boy. Question number 3. People. You might not know, but cities are filled with people. Many different kinds of people even. A whole lot of them. These people don't necessarily come from nowhere. Even the earliest settlers who originally settled in the place that will become your city eventually have come from somewhere. The placement of your city, and thus many parts of the reasons for its existence, might play an important role for why people flock to your city, but that's not all. Especially in fantasy, you can go a bit overboard. Let's take the probably most famous city founding myth, the founding of the city of Rome, and see how it got its women and later more of its people. The abduction of the Sabine women happened shortly after the founding of Rome, when Romulus realized that they may have quite a lack of women on their hands, who might be somewhat important to the city's survival, especially since there were more and more men coming to the newly founded city. The Romans then set out into the surrounding regions in search of wives to establish families with, but they couldn't find anyone who'd want to come with them. Even negotiations with other cities failed, especially the Sabines, who feared Rome as a new rival. After they were refused by the Sabines, Rome hosted a festival and invited the neighboring city's population into the city. But of course this was a ruse, since during the festival the Romans abducted the women of the Sabines and fought the Sabinate men out of the city. Later the Sabinates called for war, but the women, who according to the myth were all virgins besides Romulus's own wife, pleaded for peace, as they turned out to be already pregnant. By the way, according to Livy, the women copulated with their men on their own terms, which I think must be taken with a big spoonload of salt, like everything else with the myth of course. But anyway, your city of course doesn't need such an incel dream of a funding myth, but it might give you an idea how people flock to your city. In Rome's case, it was the military victories over its neighboring city-states that made the city strong and the reason people flocked to the city. Anyways, think about the possibilities of the people's place of origin and why they came to the city and how the city grew from its humble origins. And if they came from far and wide instead of neighboring country, think of why they made that long way from the faraway regions to settle in the city. And a tip I got from a Matt Colville video: if you think about creating a detailed list of demographics for your city, use descriptive words like majority, plurality, minority, enclaves and such, instead of numeric words and percentiles, which are hard to quantify for the average human being. The city of Pylesia, the door to the Athenian megocracy, a city sprawling with people from far and wide, bustling in its rich markets with wares from all around the world, people praying in its many temples, studying magic from its many scholars, or being robbed in its narrow street corners and alleys. Pylesia has long lost its former glamour and glory. The city of Pylesia is a more and more dull star sparkling on and around the mountainous island that made the city into what it is today. Myth states that the city was founded by a queen of the Pylesia clans of Athenians, who were driven out from their homeland after losing several wars. The collection of islands they called their new home had several natural harbors, which protected their ships from the sea gods' antics. Its soil fertile, perfect for livestock and crops, but most importantly, they hit a certain jackpot. In the mountain's mines, they found arcane crystal, a powerful resource used in magic of all kinds. But finding something that may be worth more than gold brings enemies to your doorsteps. War after war followed, in which the Pylesians had to defend their island from the outsiders, from kings and peoples that claimed the rich veins of their sparkling mountain. One day, the queen became desperate. She made a deal with a dubious being which promised to turn her firstborn son into a warrior unlike any other. The being kept its promise, but of course it was twisted. The queen's son got turned into a being half bull, half man. But that monstrous man had the promised prowess and ferocity. The Pylo Tower budged the island's enemies, but the Pylo Tower also took the throne of the city after killing his own mother. The city's people suffered under the Pylo Tower's reign until a hero, blessed by the gods, came around, saving the city from its clutches and chained the Pylo Tower into the very depths of the labyrinthine mountain, where it remains to this day. But the Pylo Tower sired many children during his reign. Children, half beast, half man, who became an integral part of the city to this day. But they aren't the only people living in the city, and far from the majority. There are enclaves and groups of people from next to everywhere around the world, especially filled with traders who look for the privilege of trade within the magocracy itself, as Pylesia is one of the few places of entry for any outsider. As the city has been part of the magocracy for almost a millennia now, the city grew with the empire, as the empire provided large swaths of the shoreward regions to satiate the city's hunger. And that's it for today's video, world builders. I hope you liked it, and if so, leave a like and subscribe, and tell me about the cities in your world. See ya!